Right. I mentioned it when I started the Goethe thing yesterday, that little bit about Goethe's work on colour was controversial. So Goethe's always thought of as being controversial. But his work on the metamorphosis of plants is not controversial, it's actually spot on. But we're now going to look at his work on colour and see what we can about that. And I think I'll just say his motivation for this work, how it began, was that he did a journey to Italy to escape from his life in southern Germany, and he wrote a book, a diary, he wrote of this, Goethe's Italian journey. But while he was there, one of the many things he wanted to do was to look at all the extraordinary paintings which there are. And he was very interested. He tried to be a painter himself at one time, among all the other things he did, but concluded in the end that it wasn't really worth the effort for him because he didn't have what would be required. But he was very interested in the colour in the paintings. And he felt that there must be some kind of lawfulness in the colour, in the way colours were used, they were juxtaposed and so on. Now, this word lawfulness to him would have meant something rather different to what it would mean to us. But he felt that he could see that artists didn't use colours in simply an arbitrary way. And he wanted to know, well, put it this way, what kind of lawfulness there was. Because he felt that in nature, everything proceeded in a non-accidental way, according to a kind of lawfulness of nature. And this was the deeper being of nature. And that when the artist was working, he or she, but in his case, of course, it would at that time be he, was, as it were, imitating nature. This is called mimesis, but this has got misunderstood. In England, they think when the artist imitates nature, there's nature there, and then he or she makes a picture which tries to... That's not what Goethe's talking about. He's saying that in a deeper, inward sense, that when the artist is painting, he is in some way imitating nature through the very way in which he uses the colours. So the very relationships between the colours. He's actually doing it unconsciously. He wouldn't have used that word, but the word was coming in, of course, sharing, but subconsciously, unconsciously doing what nature does, but now in art, with regard to the way the colours are placed next to one another and so on. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so he thought he'd find out more about this. And he discovered that nothing had been done on this at all, that he could find, or at least that's what he thought at first. In the kind of paintings he looked at, the Renaissance stuff, a lot of books have been written about form, about the geometry. Because as you know, these paintings of the Italian Renaissance are highly structured. There's a very sophisticated geometry in those paintings. And really, it was almost, you could almost say that it was the applied mathematics of the time. Because people today don't realise that. And indeed, quite a bit of mathematics was actually developed in conjunction with the work on the form of paintings. So he knew about that. But there was nothing about the colour he could find. I mean, people had got the fact there are warm colours, reds and yellows, and cold colours, blues and so on and that. The kind of polarity there with warm and cold. But that's about as far as anyone had got. And he thought this was very unsatisfactory. And when he determined that when he got back to Germany, he would investigate this question of colour. I forget he was investigating the question of the plant and so on and that. He was that's the kind of person he was. He would explore it. Well, when he got back, of course, he got pretty busy, pretty much immediately. But he did borrow some prisms, and the reason he borrowed some prisms is he started to think, well, what do we know about colour? And of course, what he did think of then, and the only thing he could think of, was the famous experiment that Newton had done with colour with a prism. Everybody knew about that, or thought they did. And he borrowed some prisms, and he then started from there. Now, the first thing you're going to do is just to look through a prism, and you're going to get some in a minute, but I've got my own here, which I carry with me in my pocket for occasions like this. These prisms are got a triangular cross section like that, and it's going to be okay here because most of you are pretty connected with your bodies, as I can see, and you all do. Oh, God knows what you do in yoga and everything. And there are a lot of people who have got no connection with their bodies whatsoever today. They sit in front of computers and television. That's why people keep walking to the street. They can't understand it. But you will be connected with your bodies, and so you won't have a problem. Because a lot of people, they do have a problem when they try to use these prisms. They can't do it. And what you do is you put it up to your eye, and so you're going to look through here. You're going to look through like that. So what that means is you've got to get one face horizontal, and then if you put your fingers on the side like that, and you put it up to the bridge of your nose and look through it, you can rotate it a bit, and you can rotate and you'll see what happens when you rotate. But you've got to get that bit horizontal. If you don't get that horizontal, what will happen is there'll be someone in the room when we start going into this who will be seeing things the opposite way around to everybody else. Eventually it'll dawn on them and they'll begin to get upset. And believe me, people do get upset. They think there's something wrong with their eyes. It's not, it's just that they're holding the prism the wrong way around. And people who are not connected with their bodies, you tell them to do this, you'd be amazed at what you see in the room. People just can't do that because there's no connection with their bodies. But here it's going to be different, I know. So the first thing we do, Philip's very kindly brought some prisms. Are they the same size, the same shape as this or not?
No, they're pentagonal. No, they're the same shape.
He's going to give the prisms round, and you can just start looking.
Sorry, Henry, because you had your back to us, are you saying the top bit needs to be horizontal?
I'm sorry.
Yeah?
Yeah. Any one will do. But you make a top bit which is horizontal. Sorry, yes, I'm sorry about that. If you've got glasses on, to make it easier for yourself, I think you would take them off. That's what they say, but I suppose you can look around, and it's a good idea, of course, to look at the window along with everything else. think the first thing that strikes everyone who does this is the astonishing vibrancy of the colours.
Really crazy.
Seeing you in a whole new light.
Now, when Goethe did this, he was very surprised at what he saw. Apart from the vibrancy of the colours, what is it that strikes you?
Well, I know what Curtis saw, so I don't know.
No, what strikes you?
Well, just like the correlation of how the colours are always connected to each other. Just,
Anything you like?
But they need to be on objects. Because rainbows are attached to objects.
I'm seeing how in the darkness on the floor, I can really clearly see the blue, and that's the darkness just on the boundary with the light, and I think that's what Goethe was pointing to when he said, you know, the
Don't
darkness.
rush ahead.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, don't rush ahead. We're doing this to experience.
Okay.
Megan, you said?
Well, it seems to be linked to objects, so that the clearest rainbows are seeing are something that's against a straight line.
Yes. Yeah. Where don't you see colours?
on the white.
On the white.
Yeah, on the white.
You only see the colours where there's some kind of boundary.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where it's all uniform, you don't see the colours.
There's something about it creating depth as well, like explain what I mean. Like on my jeans, there's like a ripple thing,
Yes.
which in real life I can see, but here
Yes, it stands out more now.
there's an entire depth
Yeah.
to it that it creates
Because of the colour effect.
because of the colours.
Yeah, yeah. And this is what struck Goethe so strongly, was that you only get the colours where there's a boundary of some kind. And there's no colours where there's a uniform whiteness. And of course the room in which he did it probably had white walls. And he was so struck by this because he expected, from what he understood of what Newton had said, that when he looked through it would all be coloured. And he thought that this meant that Newton was wrong. Well, there are apocryphal stories about what he said. But it's always the case that, you know, you could say, well, if he noticed that, surely Newton must have noticed that too. The thing is, what he later discovered is that he hadn't understood what Newton said. In fact, it was later recognised that most people hadn't. And there's a book by Dennis Sepper called Goethe contra Newton. And Sepper was at the University of Austin, Texas. And in the 1970s, thereabouts, he actually went back and he went through all the textbooks on physics that were available in Goethe's day. And he found every one of them described what Newton did incorrectly. So it wasn't... and later, Goethe came to understand this, because he went in great depth into things for himself. So what he expected to see wasn't there. And that fact launched him into this investigation with considerable determination, because it was said he'd borrowed some prisms from a man called Blüthner, and he'd kept them for a long time and hadn't looked at them because he's busy. And Blüthner sent someone to get the prisms, and Goethe said, go away, go away. And he went back to Bluden and said he won't give them to me. And he said, well, you go back and you tell him you're not leaving his house till you get them. So he went back, and Goethe was marked, and he took out a prism and had a quick look through it. And that's when it happened. It was all done in a hurry. And he got this surprise. And he said, right, that's it. He's had his prisms, I'm going to... And I don't think the chap ever got his prisms back, because Goethe then launched into this investigation, which was written up, published in 1792, which would be 4 years or so, 5 years or so, is it? Or about the same time, I can't remember now, as the Metamorphoses.
Well, that was late 1810.
No, it wasn't.
No?
What was 1810?
The Metamorphoses.
No. Oh, yes. I think I saw somewhere recently, was it you? It was, the date was given wrongly. No, it says 16. No. 17, it could have been 1789, I think. Look, in that book from Stefan, it's there, not there. The date is given in that in Goethe's Metamorphoses. But you haven't got the book, Stefan's got it. I've got the date next door.
Right.
I'm not going to get up and go and get it. But actually, isn't it on the sheet I gave you on Metamorphoses?
It says 1790 on that.
What?
1790.
That's it then. It says 1790 on that sheet I gave
What
you.
is the theory of colours 1810?
Yes, the theory of colours is 1810, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
See, this what happens with Goethe is there's various publications and people don't realise that the original work was done earlier. And Goethe first published work on this in 1792. And it's completely different in style to what he later published in 1810. And it's actually the work he did earlier in what is called Beiträge zur Optica, Contributions to Optics, in 1792, that is the real foundation of what he did. And that's what we're going to work with here. We're not going to go to the Farbenlehre of 1810. And that book I recommend to you today, Pascal, you see, he knows what he's doing. It's based almost entirely on the work of 1792, because that's where the foundation is. People don't know this, they go to the later thing. And so we're going to look at it very carefully in terms of what he originally did. In fact, what he did, well, he lays it out. They're very boring to read. You have to do it. This is how Goethe, people used to say to me, what of Goethe's could I read on science? And the answer is you better not read anything. Because people are looking for excitement. And it's so boring what he writes. Because they think, oh, Goethe, poet, romantic, wow. And it's so dull, so prosaic. And when he was asked about this, he said, well, of course it is. I'm doing science here. I'm not doing poetry. And there are a series of descriptions, which as Ron Brady always pointed out, are meant to be followed by someone who's actually doing it with him, and not meant to be read through in that way. So that's what we're going to do. Now, having recognised, having, I'm talking too loudly. Having recognised that a boundary or edge of some kind is needed, then you can simplify. And you simply make yourself a straightforward boundary. And this is what we're now going to do. Here they are. I've made some in advance. Look, instead of me going around, why don't I just pass them round. You take one, and then you can look at it through a prism. Now, the boundary is meant to be horizontal. You're meant to put it on your desk or in your hand, so the actual boundary is horizontal, parallel to the prism, therefore. Parallel to the top of the prism. So this is horizontal, the prism, and you want the boundary horizontal. If you tilt it, it'll get more complicated. You can tilt it and see what happens, but I want you first of all to look at the boundary. And don't talk about it to anyone, because you've got to look at it yourself. Have they all gone round? Okay. I want you just to focus on the bit in the middle. I know there's at the edge, you see, so you get the same phenomenon at the top edge and the bottom edge. But I want you to focus in the middle. And what do you notice?
If you're holding the black side up, red and yellow here, when you turn it, the black side is down, then it's the blues and violets.
Yeah. Are you surprised? Yeah. It's a very peculiar thing. You hold it one way and you get the reddish colours, hold it the other way and you get the bluish colours. So in a strange sort of way, we talk about, back to the warm colours and the cold colours. We've got them here both together in this phenomenon. And it depends on which way around you turn it. And you've got black and white, and you change the relationship of the prism, and you get the reds or the blues. So you've got a peculiar kind of polarity here, polarity of black and white, and the colours. And we can have both of these together. This is fun.
Wow.
And what's the curvature? Why does it curve?
Which way is it curvature?
Is that just the way I'm holding it?
Could be, or it could become. There is a curvature actually, which comes from the geometry of the thing. We'll leave that.
Okay. That's a whole physics question.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it doesn't affect the colour. What we're looking at here is the colour only.
No.
Yeah, there is a lot of other effects. You're right. I think this is rather nice, this, because there you see these two sides together, and it's very surprising that it would be like this.
It's funny because when you see it, it's one side red and the other blue, but when you mix with another surface, I mean, my hand has the red, and when it's together with the paper, it becomes all the colors.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have the green.
That's right, then you have the green. But we'll come to green in a minute. Of course, what I want to do first of all is to focus on these two different boundary phenomena. What I want you to do is what Goethe does, his method is, first of all, is that he looks at this phenomenon very carefully. I sometimes put it that he plunges into seeing, so that he really goes into the sensuous experience of the phenomenon. And then after that, without using any of this apparatus at all, he will visualize it by this procedure which he calls exacta signifia fantasy, which I translate as exact sensorial imagination. Because I don't like the word fantasy. Some people say, because in English that has certain connotations, and that's not what we're after. The exact sensorial imagination is the bit. He tries to picture in his mind exactly what he's seen without doing it, to build it in his mind so that he can see the colours as they are in the order in which they are at that boundary. And then he would do the other one in his mind. And what one can do when doing this is to actually, when you do it, to then go through from one to the other, move in your mind's eye, move through the colours at the boundary, move yourself through the colours. You have to explore this. I don't want to say too much, so let's do that, shall we? I'll give you another one here which you can also use, because it's going to be used for later, and you can do it with whichever one you want. This is going to be useful later. I'm going to come back to green in a minute.
It's like being at primary school.
Like being at primary school.
I keep rediscovering different things.
Thank you. That's better than phenomenology, isn't it? You don't have to do any work, really.
Sorry, Henry, are we supposed to be doing the mind's eye thing?
Yeah, oh yes, please. I'm going to do it too. You are supposed to be doing the mind's eye thing. But actually, with the reason I've given this one out as well, because it's easier if you do, first of all, one orientation, say black on the top and then white on the top, before you... If you bring them both together, you can bring them both together like this too. Yes, but it's easy at first to do them both separately. Does anyone have a comment I'd like to make? And I want the comments to be about the phenomenon, not about, oh, this reminded me of something I once saw, that kind of thing. I don't want any of that. We're focusing on the phenomenon. So has anyone got anything they want to pick key?
In both cases, it was going from red to yellow, or from blue to purple to the blue. The colors are getting kind of lighter, more towards white, in a sense, as you progress away from the boundary. That's what I see.
As you go away from the dark. In both cases, as you go away from the dark, the colours are getting lighter. Good.
I'm finding it hard to tell, but I think darker colours seem to be within the black, and the lighter colours within the white.
But it is hard to be sure, isn't it?
It's easier on this one though, because like it appears as a solid line going from the yellow to the blue. With the yellow and white.
It is easier with that, isn't it? That's the advantage of that one. And you find it is the case that there seems to be, that with the black on top, the colour seems to be more in the white, and then with the black on the bottom, more in the dark. Is that what you do? That's what you said, wasn't it?
I think it's hard to decipher where one starts and the next. Like,
Would you mean one colour or where the boundary is?
both.
Both, yes.
Like, they start melting a little bit, for want of a better word.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
I placed an object just to see what was happening, and it does seem to have a clear, with the going from black to dark blue, and then to light blue. It all seems to happen before the object.
Yes.
And the object's placed on the white.
Yes.
I placed it.
It's not easy to place it exactly.
Right.
That's what I found when I was first doing this, and I made marks and so on. It seems as if the colours sort of hover over the boundary. And it is
because the object might be affecting the colour.
Yes.
Right.
But to go to the, I puzzled about this a lot. I wanted it to become clear cut, but I didn't think it ever did. But the melting I like because I like that too. I mean, I have the melting thing because they seem to. You said they seem to melt into one another. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yes. Like the line when I look at it like this is obviously very clear, but at the same time, when you look through the prism or even in the mind's eye, the boundary is clearer because it's brighter, and yet it also melts in one into another.
Yes. Yes, it is very interesting. Did other people find that? The colours melting into one another.
Sorry, the colours within the...
Well, with each boundary, just to take the colours at any one boundary. It's as if they sort of melt into one another. There's a kind of movement you can feel. It is very interesting, is this? Because this I mean, I haven't done this with people for 10 years. I can't imagine. I used to do this here regularly, but I do remember that this happens when you do the visualization. It begins to come alive in a different way, and people find this sense of movement in the boundary. That they're not. When we describe it, we say, "What are the colours at the boundary?" We say, "Oh, look, there's red, orange, yellow." Now, when we do that, we actually make a separation. And then when you do the visualization, there isn't that separation. It's as if you move through the colours and one melts into another. I remember one person some years ago, because I looked this up in my notes, and said, this was in 1997, God, that the boundaries dissolved and she was swimming from one colour into another. She felt herself swimming through the colours. And that is very interesting because this always happens when you do the visualization. But if you don't do the visualization, you just look at the colours, you don't get this at all. So now when you've got that, if you go back and look at the colours again, sometimes people say, well, they now actually, it affects their sensory experience of the colours. That they see them differently because now they've seen them in this more flowing kind of way.
Well, I think I'm having a fairly different experience then because for 47 years I've been, well, not quite that long, I've been told that I'm colourblind. And the world is full of colour to my visual experience. And I've just realised that I'm using the prism and I can see what I call the blues and the yellows.
Yes.
Right. The gradation of colours is not clear to me, and when I'm trying to imagine them, there's no colour whatsoever. There just isn't any colour. I can't imagine colour.
Okay.
So this is very interesting. I have no idea what it's about or why. But I've been sitting here, my eyes closed, trying to imagine colour, and so I thought I'll try another way of imagining colour. And so I think of an object, a tree, the ocean, and I can build an image where colour is present, but then when I try and grasp that colour within that image, it's not there. So, yes, I just wondered.
Well, thank you for that. I hope this isn't too much of a...
It's fascinating. This is brilliant. I mean, I've never thought of myself as not imagining colours before. I'm now suddenly aware that if I try to imagine a colour, it's not there. But I see it. I mean, I'm seeing all of these colours. I think I'm not seeing the gradation of colours that you're all seeing from your descriptions when you're looking through the prism.
It's very possible. Yes.
But, does anyone find it especially easy to visualize colours?
I find I can hold it, this replica, the sort of replica, I can hold it for a short while and then it disappears, and it disappears into a feeling. It's like a bodily sensation as opposed to the colour. I can't actually see yellow, but possibly because of our associations to yellow, there's sort of a light feeling. Right. And that's all that's left. Well, I'm not holding all the,
I mean, things do change. Sometimes, when I've done this work in the past, people have found it impossibly difficult. They don't even know what I mean when I say visualize it, because this is the kind of society we now live in. At an earlier period of time, visualization was practiced a lot. For example, the man I worked for years, his name J.G. Bennett, who set up that academy that I mentioned and so on, that he worked a great deal with visualization because he came from a time when that was done. Einstein visualized a lot. Roger Penrose has a visualizing ability that's beyond imagination. He can actually get complex, multi-dimensional geometrical objects changing form in his visualization. But then he's naturally that way. Most people aren't. Most people are in between. Some people can't visualize at all. Now, the man I learnt about all this from and doing this and practiced with for many years always used to say, and now you form a mental image of this. And we would form mental images. We could think of all sorts of things, and we should form mental images. There's a great deal of work of forming mental images, perhaps of ourselves in a situation, and then doing something in that situation. Great deal of work was done with mental images. And then years later, he said one day he had never had any idea what anybody meant by a mental image. And for years he'd been talking about this and directing us to do this. And we said, well, how can this possibly be? And he said, well, it's quite simple. I can't form images, but I can think this directly, and it's real and I'm there. But there's no image. And for other people, there's an image. Now, was then, not so much now, strongly visual. I could get images. But I mention this because it means there are differences between people. And in this case, it also means that if you don't get images, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means that that's not your way of doing it. You can find another way. And he did, and he taught us visualization, and always used the word mental image because he knew that people had mental images, but he didn't. It's extraordinary. And it worked. Yes?
So I was... Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I'm quite happy with forming the images, but there's this, when it comes to using the verbal intellect, whilst those images are formed, that's when this odd disruption happens. When I say, oh, there's the dark blue, then the dark blue sort of loses its integrity.
Yes.
But as soon as I start thinking the word,
yes,
the image is...
Did other people find that?
I find when there's two sort of states of visualization I can do. I can do the everyday sort where I'm more or less thinking the object. When I stop and I try quite hard, I can start to get pictures in front of me where I get colours. But I was just experimenting with that. It took me about 2 minutes to get to that state.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to think about like red tomatoes on a vine or sort of a yellow flower in a field. Then I could do it, but I couldn't do it just what we were doing here.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what's going on.
Sorry?
So I have no idea what I'm doing.
So I can't hear you.
I just like, it's not, I don't know if I just don't understand Glenn's experience, because it's not like I can see color just alone, like on its own. I always have to see it in context of something, but like it's still just black. It's still just dark whenever I have my eyes closed if I'm actually trying to see.
But when you visualize this, if you take this and you visualize that, can you not visualize here? You've got the reds and yellow,
yeah,
and there you've got the blues. Can you not visualize them?
Like you're not seeing them with your eyes, of course. When you close your eyes, physically your eyes are closed, so it's black.
Yeah.
But in your mind's eye,
for sure. I can imagine.
It's like, what's the difference anyway?
Yeah.
If you think about our dream states,
Mm-hmm.
do we dream in black and white? Or is it vividly rich with color?
Yeah, I have no problem visualizing the colors when I'm putting them in context of something, but if I'm trying to just picture yellow...
Well, what I was actually asking you to do was to visualize it in this situation.
Okay.
I didn't say just picture...
Yeah, I was trying to like...
Well, I've got to pull attention back to the phenomenon, because that's what we're doing, otherwise we're going to get lost. And this is all very interesting indeed and relevant, but we mustn't go too far away from the phenomenon. Because if you can focus on, in your visualization, the colours at the boundary, then people do get this sense of a movement there, as if you're moving from one to the other. And I think in that article that I noticed this last night, I'd written an article in this journal, and I'd written there what we experience. We find there is a dynamic quality in the colours of each boundary. As we move through the colours of the boundary in imagination, we begin to experience their sensuous quality, as if we were within the colours. Did anyone feel that they were within the colours? Good. One student described this as feeling like she was swimming through the colours. We've had that. We find there is a dynamic quality in the colours of each boundary. what we experience is not separate colours, red, orange, yellow, or pale blue, deeper blue, violet, but something more like, all hyphenated, red lightning to orange, red lightning to orange, lightning to yellow as a dynamic whole. All hyphenated.
But that's, I mean, for me, I kind of get a lot of sympathy with Glenn here, as I'm also colourblind, and that's what I see anyway. Like, even not through prisms, like colours, they merge into one another anyway.
Right, okay.
So it's actually giving me quite a bad headache trying to understand what I'm hearing everybody saying about this clear distinction between the colours, because I don't see that anyway. It's a really bad headache.
Well, I don't want to give you a bad headache, but I do have some Nurofen with codeine. But I'm reluctant to use them because they've been withdrawn from the market because animal rights people interfered with them. Did you know about that?
Yeah.
And I can't get any more at the moment. And I never travel anywhere without Nurofen and codeine. So if you have a real problem...
It's alright, as soon as I stop making an effort to try and understand what everyone's seeing, it gets better.
Then just stop trying to understand what everyone's saying. Just don't worry. Don't worry at all. No. This has to be done in a very light way. This does. This is not to be heavy. And what you don't want, don't like, forget it. I just want to get this sense, because this dynamic sense, and if you're swimming through all the colours and melting, it's as if the colours at the boundary are becoming like one whole, but it's one whole with movement. And therefore, get the sense of the colours belonging together.
I was about to say that what I found particularly interesting is when you do this, and then you turn it upside down, and it has the opposite, the blue and the whatever, versus the red and the yellow. And when I was doing it visually, and I was imagining this, so with the red and yellow and the blue and whatever at the bottom, in my mind they weren't separate, even though there was an expanse between them.
Yeah.
They wanted to be.
They want to come together.
Yeah.
They wanted to come together, and that also comes with the visualization, which you may not notice ordinarily if you just look at it. You see them as separate, but these two boundary edge phenomena, the reddish ones and the bluish ones, it's as if you get the sense that they belong together, and they want to come together.
Yeah.
I did this thing where I slowly turned this one round.
Yes.
So at one point I had points with the different colours facing each other, and then as it turned, they kind of slipped. And visualising that gave me a real sense of just going, being kind of stuck with that movement.
Excellent.
So if we, so then if we think about just getting rid of that void, because it was like, it's going red, yellow, we want to do it, blues, but then here, if we had another white, it'd go red, yellow, blue, red, so it's like it's all folding in each other. So if we got rid of that expanse in where we don't see color, that is because they're...
Well, you can do that. You can do it. Unfortunately, these are curling. So you can do that with the curling one, muck it up, but I can sort that out for you. Because you can do that. What I would imagine normally, and I'm sorry these are curled, paper, I just did these recently, the paper's not very good. If you've got two together like that and gradually move the two darker ones together, but if you do that you'll get extra colours because of the curling. Therefore, let me give you what I prepared earlier. I prefer it actually if it could be done where people did it themselves. But it's not going to work with the curling. So you've got to imagine this is what's happened here.
Wow.
If you don't want to use this, don't. Oh wow.
Like the pink foil.
Will they merge? There's no ones. colours merge. It's a rainbow, it's a full. You can even see the green.
Yes.
Yeah.
Green has appeared.
And the black.
Interestingly, green isn't appearing on my, but I've seen the green.
Well, you can. You could get this by rotating the prism. You need to. If you get the prism up, they separate, and then if you rotate the prism till it's quite narrow, you can actually see the green happening. Ooh, the coming into being of green.
Take your word for it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Glenn, out of interest, if you put it close up and look at it, and then further away, does anything change for you?
Yeah, there's just a bigger gap in the middle, closer up.
Of what though? Like, what is when there isn't a gap? What is there?
Sorry.
When there
What's in
isn't
the
a gap, what is there?
Then I think Charles just put it beautifully. You know, I mean, there's just this gradation of colours, but to give a name to them is beyond me.
Yeah, interesting.
There's kind of yellowy colours and bluey colours, and
But I suddenly managed to get red, which is quite an achievement.
oh,
Yeah. Well, I don't see red very
shut
well.
up, everybody! I'm concentrating.
I find this about the kind of optimum position to see it easily, where the green is clearly there. And as you say, people who talk the rainbow, you now have the rainbow. And actually, sometimes people comment on this earlier, and someone will say, hey, hang on a minute, where's green? We haven't seen green. Green's missing. And now you've got the colours. And also, this is usually spoken of as the spectrum. And now for the first time we have the spectrum. And what we can begin to see here is that it's a little bit more complex than we usually think of it as, but don't think how we usually think of it as now. And of course, you can turn it all round the other way. You could arrange it. You could arrange it so that you had a dark space there, and you'll get the colours now, and I'd like you to look at that and see what colours you get here and how they relate to the colours you had when that was a white space.
Those
Rainbow warriors.
Yeah.
when you attach them in the black.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's because as a child,
The whole
my
bit.
mum had like a
Yes,
thing that I
because-
had with my mum.
because
It was
it's-
rainbows.
It's because of
Whether it's
the
that
way
or whether it's just something intrinsically
The whole back wall has got
about
green tinge. Phillips tint green.
That means I have an attachment to it.
But,
Just representing something of you.
when I with this in front of me,
There's a memory that's generated internally which I have
and
emotional
then when I look further
attachment to. Whether there's something
beyond,
just
Oh,
intrinsic
yeah, I can see what you're saying.
there's green.
colour that is
And then the back wall,
as a
the
human
arch,
being,
the dark
is
arch,
interesting.
underneath
is
that
attachment.
is then
Which
green.
is that? Yours?
It's expressing some emotional
Can you see red on that
movement.
at all? Because I can't see it on that
It's,
one.
it's
I get a
almost
little
like
Yes,
bit
I've got a
of
little
the
bit of red on this
it's
one.
when you look at that,
Yeah,
it's almost
Can't
like
know.
a hidden secret.
See the
You see
red.
green on
Yeah.
top?
Now, I want you to...
What colour do you see?
can we look at this, please?
Too interesting.
Now, what you see
Yes,
is, of course, that the colours are reversed compared to what they were before. Now you've got the blues at the top and the reds at the bottom. And if you were to bring those together, and we won't do it because it will the curl, but I've prepared one for you already. You would have a black slit, a black space instead of a white one. Then you can see what happens there when you get the colours merging from opposite directions.
Interesting. So you get no colour at all?
No, black's gone.
That's not. And I get a
Slightly Peter.
green on
When I go to bed earlier,
with pattern on the top.
Oh,
So that- Yellow in the bottom, and kind of a magenta in the middle.
Yeah.
And there you see the colours come together, but from the opposite side, as it were. And where before you had green, you now have this magenta colour.
Which is what's magenta?
It's kind of a reddish
Pink.
purple.
It's like a pink.
Reddish purple, pinkish.
So
People can never agree about the name of it,
Yeah.
and people argue about it, and real Goethenists get very hot under the collar if you don't call it by the name they think it should be called by.
In answer, Glenn just said, is
Okay.
it a bluey colour? But is it the primary colours? Like
I always put a Y on the end of the
yellow
colours.
and
Because then it's kind of
On an ink
Well,
cyan magenta.
I don't know.
Primary colours.
yeah.
I think what we need to do, we need to do is to actually what we need to do is to stay with the phenomenon, because don't forget, Goethe would never have used a phrase like primary colours. That would not have been there for him, and therefore he would actually have not used such a phrase. But we get from this quite a lot. First of all, there is this sense of polarity. There's a polarity anyway between the black and the white. That's a very obvious polarity. And then we get the different colours, the different configurations of the boundaries, orientations of the boundaries. We get some kind of sense that there's a polarity there, as if those two poles, there are two poles that belong together as one whole, which is surprising. And then we find the colours within each boundary. We get this sense of movement when we visualise, as if we're going from one colour to another, as if one colour is turning into the other colour in some way. Well, obviously, it isn't exactly like that, but there is a sense of a dynamic wholeness in the boundary, in which the colours actually belong together. And so there's the belongingness, there's the wholeness. So actually all this time, in this phenomenon, which we might start out, many people do, not everyone, but we might start out by describing them and saying, oh look, there's red, orange, yellow. Oh look, there's, and I'm going to call it, well, how am I going to call it? Deep blue, light, no, I'm not going to call it that. There's deep blue and lighter blue. There's a problem at that boundary. People see different things, but you know what I mean anyway. And then when you start out, particularly when you just look for most people, you don't actually have a sense of this being a dynamic whole. And now if you were to combine the whole lot, you could see you could go, and some people describe the thing as a circle, because you could go round and you could bring the two boundaries together that way, and also the other way. And in one way you get the green, and the other way you get this magenta, and so you have a whole, almost a circle of colour, in which it's almost as if there is a dynamical condition of one colour changing into different modes of itself when there are some kind of different circumstances, and we don't know what those different circumstances are yet, because we haven't gone that far yet. I'm rushing ahead a bit there. I say in the sense that there's one colour changing into different modes of itself according to some kind of change in circumstances, whatever they might be. Is that going too far for you?
No.
And I'm going to go into that now, because it's the next step. We must now take the next step. Now, the thing is, what we've done so far, really, is as far as Goethe went in the 1792 contributions to optics. Though he doesn't describe it in this kind of way with the wholeness, he just puts out lots of observations. And he expected people to do them, and then he expected when they did, they would simply see the truth of what he was saying. But in fact that didn't happen. First of all, people didn't do them, or if they did, they thought there was something wrong, because they said, look, Newton, why are you wasting Goethe, why are you wasting your time on this? Because don't you know that Newton sorted all this out? and you're supposed to go and write some more plays or poems or something like that. And so, and he got very, very annoyed about this. And he set off and he launched into a very detailed study of colour and the whole history of colour. And he went right back to the Renaissance painters and read everything he could about it, right back to Aristotle and so on. And he got to know a very great deal. And in fact, there are people who say, because of his work on the history of colour, he was the first person to actually do the history of science. And some people have said he also, among all his other things, founded the discipline of the history of science. Well, the people who say that are actually Germans who want, because everything has to go back to Goethe. But I think one can be sympathetic that no one before had actually done a history of science, any science in that way. And he did the history of the science of colour. Now, later on, when we come to this big book in the 1810, he does go further than this. And he tries to understand the phenomenon more deeply. See, he said at the moment, he said, what we're doing is we're looking at this phenomenon in a rather complicated way, because it depends on the use of this very awkwardly shaped piece of glass, which is not at all natural. And he said that he believes that every phenomenon appeared somewhere in nature in an especially simple way. You just had to find it. And there would be no secondary complicated factors like a prism or anything like that. Now, he called such an appearance of the phenomenon an instance worth 1,000, bearing all within itself. So you get the picture. This one instance is worth 1,000 others, because it's actually got everything within it. And you can see here this idea of the whole and the part and so on. And I'm going to go into this here, and then I'm going to talk more, this will probably be tomorrow, about this instance worth 1,000, its background. Because in the case of colour, he found what he was looking for in the colours of the sun and the colours of the sky. First of all, I'm going to think about the sun. And you might want to follow this in your mind's eye. Because the great thing about Goethe is that he continually draws us back into the sensuousness of the phenomenon itself. I think I've explained in that article why I use the word sensuous rather than sensory. When I say that Goethe returned from the mathematical approach to the sensuousness of the phenomenon, most people say that Goethe emphasized the sensory experience. But the word sensory experience doesn't really convey it, because all science depends on sense experience. If you read a thermometer, it depends on sense experience. And it really is, he's going into the feeling, the quality of the phenomenon. And that, I say, is a sensuous experience. And I know in English, sensuous has another connotation, which I'm clearly not including. And that I was emboldened to use this phrase because I did find it also many years ago in a paper published in America, and it's in the Scientific American Reader on Consciousness, edited by Ornstein, and the paper was called The Sensuous Intellectual Complementarity in Science, or something or other. And he used the word sensuous, so I thought, well, that's okay, I can refer to this, and then that's a precedent, like in law, and I'll get away with it, hopefully. So it's the sensuousness of the experience we're after, of the colour. So we think about the colour of the sun, and we have to pretend in England that we have a clear sky. Okay, we get the odd day. But if you looked at the sun in the mid-heavens, in England, it will look yellow. If you go to other parts of the world in the desert, it won't. It'll be, you won't be able to look at it anyway, and it'll be very whitish. But if you're in here, it will look yellow. And if you were, in fact, to go higher up in the Earth's atmosphere, it would gradually become whiter and whiter and whiter. Now, if the sun, over the day, the sun appears to move, as far as we're concerned, it does, and it moves across, and as it gets down towards the horizon, the colour changes. It deepens from yellow into a more orangey colour. And eventually, if the conditions are right, when it gets to the horizon, you get your red sunset. So if you think about the colours of the sun throughout the day, they've actually just gone through the colours of one of the boundaries, from red to orange to yellow. So those colours there are actually also seen in the colours of the sun, which is very interesting. Now, if we consider the other aspect of things, what are we doing here? We're looking at the sun, and we're looking at it through the Earth's atmosphere. And what Goethe says is that the Earth's atmosphere is an opaque medium. We're not aware of it, but it's opaque, so far as the light is concerned. And therefore, it has a darkening effect on the light. So we have the light of the sun, but we're seeing it through a medium which has a darkening effect on it. The less the medium, the less the darkening effect. So if you go up into the upper atmosphere, where it's much thinner, then the darkening effect is almost unnoticeable. The sun appears white. But when we look at the sun, there's quite a thickness of atmosphere we're seeing it through, and so it's darkened and becomes yellowish. The first darkening of light, the colour, the darkening of the light, the colour becomes yellowish. And as the sun goes down over the heavens and down, we're actually, because of the geometry, looking at the sun through a greater and greater thickness of atmosphere. And therefore the darkening effect increases. And the yellow darkens into orange and darkens into red. So what we're seeing, what we're doing, is the phenomenon is of light seen through dark. And we're experiencing the darkening of light. And where we have the darkening of light, then we get these warm colours, these reddish colours. Don't get it lost now. The red, the orange and the yellow and so on. I want to look now at the other side of the story, the same phenomenon. Because if you look at the sky at the same time, excuse me, when the sun is yellow, then you find the sky is blue. So if you look at the mid-heavens, I'm talking about in England, in Northern Europe, if you look, the sky in the mid-heavens may well be, if we had a nice summer day, quite a deep blue, a lovely azure colour. I do remember it from childhood occasionally. But if you were to go up in the Earth's atmosphere, the further up you went, then it would actually become violet, and actually then black. And funnily enough, one of the objections people had to Goethe's work on colour was they said, that's ridiculous, Goethe. That means if you went up a high mountain and looked at the sky, it would begin to look violet. What nonsense. And of course, that's exactly what happens. And remember, the first people, the Yuri Gagarin and people went up. They, and I've got it, so it's in the back of that book. They described the change in the sky and how astonished he was to see the sky becoming, what's the deep, I've forgotten the name now. Indigo and violet. And there it was. So, of course, so we are seeing the sky if you then move your gaze from the mid-heavens, say midday, down towards the horizon, you'll notice that the blue of the sky gets lighter and lighter and lighter the closer you get to the horizon. Now Goethe says we're in the same situation here, but the effect is the opposite. We're actually looking, when we look up there, we're looking into outer space. We're looking into the blackness of space directly. But we don't see that. We see a blue sky. And that is the Earth's atmosphere. And here he says, instead of having a darkening effect, this time it's the opposite. Because one of the things the Earth's atmosphere does is to hold light. And so we're looking at the darkness of space, through a light-filled medium. And that has a lightening effect on the dark. And that actually lightens the dark. First of all, it would go into high up, into violet, and then further down, it come down into blue, and then finally the lightning effect, the bigger on the horizon, because the thicker atmosphere there, then the lightning effect will produce the light blue. And so in this case, we're seeing dark through light. And we're experiencing the darkening. I've got that right. Yeah, I've got that right. First one. We're seeing dark through light. And we're experiencing, therefore, the lightening of dark. And when we have the lightening of dark, the blue colours emerge from the dark. And so this polarity that we now have of the colours is revealed as being the darkening of light and the lightning, the darkening of light and the lightening of dark. And there is the polarity. And when you bring them together, you have the lightening of dark in the darkening of light, and that is where the green appears. Or you can bring them together the other way around, and that's where the other one appears. And this is how, and in this case, the role of the medium is relational. It's not a fixed thing, it depends on the context. It depends whether you're looking at something dark through the medium or something light through the medium. You have to look upon it in a contextual way. And Goethe calls this darkening of light and the lightening of dark, which is because we see the light through a darkening medium, or we see the dark through the same medium now lightening. He calls that the primal phenomenon. In German, Urphänomen. There's a great deal of trouble about all this kind of thing. Because the prefix "ur" is a grammatical feature of German. But people just talk about all sorts of things. Sometimes they call this the archetypal phenomenon, then they imagine all sorts of other things. But this is a very basic thing. He calls this the primal phenomenon. And he virtually, in effect, says that's what you can't go beyond. Phenomenologically, this is the primal phenomenon. And he calls it the deeds and the sufferings of light. The deeds of light are the lightening of dark. The sufferings of light are the darkening of light. And this is his instance worth 1,000, bearing all within itself. And so what he's doing here is he's learning to see the coming into being of the colours. That's what he's doing. He's not starting with finished colours. He's seeing dynamically the colours coming into being. So we're back to that again. This is the dynamic approach. And he learns to see this in the phenomenon itself, not by introducing an explanation, not by introducing a theory, but from the phenomenon itself. So it's as if, as someone put it, he tries to make the phenomenon visible. Well, you'd say, hey, hang on a minute. That's what it means, the phenomenon is visible. Yeah, but it's only partly visible to begin with. In this way, he's making it more visible until he can see what the phenomenon is. It's the lightening of dark and the darkening of light. And that's the primal phenomenon. And from that, you can see the coming into being of the colours. And the colours are there, the colours are excited in the light when the conditions are right. And the colour you get depends on the conditions. And when the colours when the conditions change, the colour changes. When all the conditions go, then there's no colour. So the colours are excited in the light. They're emergent, therefore. So that's as far as I'm going to go today, thank goodness, because it's lunchtime. And actually, that is the perfect place to stop. Absolutely spot-on place to stop. I'm going to say more about this primal something or other tomorrow morning, and then I'm going to go on from there to some further things to do with this. Are you enjoying this?
Yes.
Good. Okay, well, if you're enjoying it, that's all right. You can get the sense of the coming into being. That's the dynamic approach. And then we'll see tomorrow also what happens when you do it the other way, when you begin with the finished product. And that's what we're going to see, along with a bit more. All you need to do, I don't want you to sort those bits. I'll do that. If you just give me your pile of papers first of all, just any old pile, I'll sort that out later. It'll give me something to do this afternoon. Thank you. I look forward to it.
Has anybody heard of or experienced the green flash?
I was just going to say something about that.
Does it happen on land, or does it only happen when you're looking over the ocean?
You get it in an aeroplane, high altitude, indoors.
No, very far horizon.
Indoors.
Yeah, okay. Because, I mean, my wife exclaims excitedly every time we see it when we're outside. Because I never see it. But now I at least understand why it happens.
Yes, that's really very interesting. In fact,
it's like the little white bar in a way. That's the white bar, and as it gets closer and closer.
You look it up on YouTube. You just type in the green flash.
And it literally travels.
Well, maybe no, I What is it?
I did see it from a plane once.
I've witnessed it many, many times. It's just I can't see the green bit. So,
Green flash. Glenn, did that? Very good. And Charles, makes sense to you. Because Henry's view of light makes sense to you.
This only makes sense in a theoretical way. I think it's sort of thinking for a while on this one.
Did what make sense?
If the very last second,
the different way they see the world, you could still.
Still follow what Goethe said.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what you were saying, because you now said, now I know why that's there, though you can't see it.
Well, and the other thing is that I'm rather liberated, actually. I've become even more of a fan of Goethe because he wasn't worried about, this what I've always considered to be rather troublesome idea of separating the colours out.
Yeah.
Obviously he did do that, but it's always been a hassle for me that all of these different shades of the same colour is the way that I've always seen it, and now the way I think of colour has always been that way. They're just different shades of the same colour to me, and everybody else is hung up on no, that's not that colour. That's actually something else. Well, fine, but.
In this way, you see, there are actually different manifestations of what amounts to one.
For me, that works really well.
Good. That's excellent. Then we have a very good result. Well, I think I'm going for lunch.